law enforcement grant money. The judge wrote that it violates statutory and constitutional law. I'm not sure which Constitution he's reading, but I believe it's written in the U.S. Constitution that part of the president's job is to defend the country.
In April, a federal appeals court sided with Chicago in a similar dispute. So Gramley says this issue needs to go to the Supreme Court.
It's troubling to think that it has to go there when, to most Americans, it's written in plain English that the president has the right to protect our borders, and that should include the right to withhold funds from cities that do not adhere to federal law when it comes to harboring illegal aliens.
I'm Chad Groening.
A West Virginia Christian parent became enraged when he discovered his daughter's school assignment was to practice writing the Islam Declaration of Faith in Aramaic calligraphy.
Rich Penkoski says his seventh-grade daughter was given a packet of information about Islam containing the handwriting lesson. Donna Hearn of the Constitutional Coalition says the calligraphy lesson was dishonest because that's not how students learn calligraphy.
You don't just have a lesson or two. You work very hard, and you build up, and you learn the techniques, and, you don't start writing off by copying something. You never start that way. So for them to say that was disingenuous.
Hearn says it doesn't matter that the lesson was in Aramaic. It is still potentially dangerous.
When you write out that declaration of belief of the Islamic profession of faith, when you write that out, you are considered by many to have accepted Islam as your faith.
The teacher, Catherine Hinson, is now trying to back away from the controversy by saying she did not actually assign the packet for a grade, but simply gave it to the class as optional reading, according to thechristianpost.com. I'm Bob Kellogg.
American Family News is online at onenewsnow.com and on the One News Now mobile app. I'm Rusty Pugh.
I'm Will Addison, Director of Urban Family Talk. We desire to be a movement of time tellers. In 1 Chronicles 12:32 it says, "The sons of Issachar were men who had understanding of the time, to know what Israel ought to do." In these perilous times, God is raising up a people of discernment who will see, pray, and act. We sound the alarm as watchmen. We cry aloud that God's people may be activated for his service. Join the movement at urbanfamilytalk.com.
Welcome to Stacy on the Right with your host, Stacy Washington.
Love is everlasting, love is only kind, love is.
I never thought Sam Bee should be fired over her remark. But to me, the interesting thing was to fall back on, I'm a comedian. So is Roseanne. That doesn't, being a comedian doesn't excuse everyone's comments. And it was more than uncivil in my view. I mean, that term is more than just vulgar. It's deeply offensive to a lot of women. But did you get it done?
Well, I mean, I think when you talk about civility, we all have a responsibility to take part in it. And especially now, every word that you say is, if you're a public figure, if you're on TV, whatever it is, we all have to take a step back and say, what am I saying and what effect is it going to have on people? Because we are at odds with each other all the time.
Mm-hmm. I do think the but was significant. I do feel like she was sort of talking out of both sides of her mouth, that there was an apology there last night, but there also was a scolding of people for caring about this and for having issues with her using that word on air against a woman. And I think that it's very possible for people to care about this immigration issue, to care about children being removed from their parents at the border, and also care about the word, the use of the C word.
Exactly. And with respect to our children as well, you're not wanting that word circulated in the lexicon. It's like same people who got upset that Trump called me and others bimbos should be equally upset. And I don't find I'm a comedian an adequate excuse. I understand you want to go to the Comedy Cellar and make those jokes on stage, go for it.
Wow. Okay, welcome to the show. Stacy Washington, host of Stacy on the Right here on American Family Radio, AFR.net, and Urban Family Talk, urbanfamilytalk.com. And welcome to the show. I really, there's so much more to the Samantha Bee saga than what I hear people talking about. And there's so much more to the immigration story than I hear people talking about. She apologized last night on the show, Samantha Bee did, but it was an insincere, I'm sorry you were offended type of an apology. And should we have expected more? Probably not. If we know anything about what is now the divide in America, it's that there are two sets of behavioral standards. And on the right, if you run afoul of those, you stand to lose a lot more than you do if you're on the left. And that's because there's an inherent goodness that is ascribed to the liberal ideology by leftists, so much so that if you need to curse or call someone out of their name or call someone an orange orangutan or, impugn the very morality of someone's family members or drive them out of their jobs or even take away their personal safety, that's considered to be, it's just, it's what you have to do. You're resisting. That's justified. But on the right, any infraction can mean the loss of your livelihood or your business that you created. In the case of Brendan Eich, he lost Mozilla. He created that. It doesn't exist without Brendan Eich. He was thrown out of there because once upon a time he wrote a check to an organization that supported a referendum that said marriage is between one man and one woman. So, but if a liberal is ever thought to be in danger of losing their job, they circle the wagons and they say, well, you call us snowflakes, you're a snowflake. You can't handle a little bit of comedy. What Samantha Bee does on her program may be what liberals consider to be comedy, but her regular roasting and attacks, verbal assaults on women on the right, their looks, their weight, their intelligence, their honesty, their honor, their morality, those are not comedic efforts. They're direct assaults. They're mockery of people that has been justified. And here on Christian radio, we have a lot of laughs. We joke around. This show it's not meant to drag you down in the afternoons. We have fun here. But in the end, if we as Christians, no matter what our political ideology, whether we're on the left or the right in the middle, if you really believe that Jesus Christ is the Son of God, he died on the cross, rose again on the third day, ascended to the right hand of the Father, and pleads the blood of Jesus at the mercy seat over you day and night, and that his mercies are new every morning, and that you are to contend for the faith, and you're a disciple of his, a bondservant of Jesus Christ, then you know that at one moment your life will end, and the next moment you'll be at the judgment seat, and you'll have to account for every word that you ever spoke, every thought, every deed, every action, every inaction. And part of that accounting will be whether or not you made okay, justified, acquiesced to, gave into, accepted, or even promoted the mockery of other individuals under the guise of, well, it's okay to call her the C word because her dad's Donald Trump. It's okay to tear her down because she's married to Donald Trump and others. And that goes on the same thing. If you think Michelle Obama's an orangutan or some kind of an ape, or if you're constantly talking about her being transgendered, or if you're constantly posting stories about Michelle Obama not being the birth mother of the two children that she and Barack Obama share, it's the same thing. And that's an unpopular view. Let me tell you, I've had an interview on a major right wing, admittedly, and I'm considered right wing, so that's no insult to me. I had an interview canceled because after they looked through my Facebook page, I had within a few months of that booking date, I had said it's not right to say that Barack Obama's a monkey. And for that, my interview was canceled. So I don't care. I mean, honestly, if you're just tuned into the show today, welcome. Gird your loins. If you're a regular on the show, I don't care about that kind of stuff. If I have to continually police my opinions and my views based on what other people think or feel, it means I really have no allegiances and these ideas aren't mine. And as often as that accusation is hurled at me, I prove it to be untrue every day right here on this show. Every day in my life and in the writings that I've done over the years and in all of my postings, all of that, I prove that it's not a 55-year-old white guy behind a computer and this is an avatar. This is actually me. These are my views. And as offensive as they might be to you, and as offensive as your views might be to me, we all have the right to those views under the First Amendment of the Constitution, which the Constitution doesn't give us the rights. It protects our rights from infringement. Here in America, we believe the right to free speech and to your own freedom, liberty, and self-actualization through your ideas and belief in those ideas, as repugnant as they may be to others, that those are God-given rights and that the Constitution just protects those. So, that's why I usually, and obviously I did last week, I said I thought Samantha Bee should be fired for what she said about Ivanka Trump. Not so much because I believe that when people make mistakes, they should be fired. I actually believe the opposite of that. But I don't accept this double standard. If you think Roseanne Barr should have been fired, then obviously Samantha Bee should have been fired, and Bill Maher and Joy Behar, and on and on and on and on. Chris Rock. If comedy is comedy, then no one should have been fired. But you can't have it both ways. So it's an interesting story. It's, it is what it is. Until we're willing to take back what is rightfully ours, which is our First Amendment right, we're going to continue to see these kinds of stories. And so I'm highlighting it here, not because we're going to sit around and complain and wring our hands and, oh, woe is me, conservatives aren't treated fairly. It's what will we do about it? Do you have the companies that are currently persecuting right-sided views? Are you funding those companies? And I know it's not possible to completely excoriate ourselves from or extricate ourselves from every single company that ever had a leftist view or has a leftist board or their viewpoint is on the left. It's not possible. But it is possible in our own ways to make substantial changes, such as the Target boycott. That is something that is effective and is doable. I'm over here. We're in our 3rd year of not setting foot in a Target, and it has been hard. There are certain things actions we can take, or we can say, I'm just not shopping at that place anymore. I'm not going to give that place my business. And you let them know why, and then you stick with it. And of course, the number one thing we can do is to pray over these things. We live in a fallen world. We're never going to have this utopia that the liberals often will say, well, if we could just stop gun violence, then what? I was actually involved in a discussion about some of there's a new piece out, and I'll have to find it. A friend of mine was able to locate the link. I read the article yesterday, and then I wasn't able to find the link to it again afterwards. You know how you close your windows out, and then you're like, how can I get that article back? And it's about areas of the United States where there are murders. And those murders, not only are they never solved, but they never even get an arrest. They're basically almost completely uninvestigated beyond the fact that someone was murdered. An investigation is open, but it's never really completed because they can't get any information. And so in talking about that, I was hearkening back to a piece I wrote in February for Real Clear Politics about solutions to the homicide rate in St. Louis being the number 1 per capita in the nation. And it was just one of those things where it's very discouraging to see the numbers of how many people in St. Louis are killed every year, and how many of them, their age range, and they're usually black, they're young men, and they're killed by other young black men. And these murders go unsolved. And so the families just know that someone killed their child, and that's it. Their son, their brother, their uncle, whatever. And in having that discussion, there's a lot of emotion that's involved. And there's a lot of discussion about, well, there's more than one issue. There's the black on black crime, but there's also police brutality. And I do think there's room in our conversation. That's why at Project 21, we want to strengthen relationships between communities and police by getting police out of the regulatory business. The reason we want to do that is because someone who's constantly looking after you to see if you're parked on the wrong side of the street, or, arresting people for selling loose cigarettes and these minor infractions, and then people are going to jail and staying there for weeks and weeks and weeks because they can't pay the fines, that's going to degrade the relationship between those in their investigators, they're to protect and serve, their police officers, their public servants. So we want to get them out of the regulatory industry and back to what they do best, which means communities will be much more likely to report crime, to send in tips on people who are criminals, so that the police can investigate and solve crimes, which then again raises their stock with the communities that they serve. And so all of these things point to there's an imbalance. The imbalance is that government has gotten too big, it's in too many things, and the ideology that promotes that wants even more government. And so the promises that are being made, well, if we could just stop the gun violence, if we could just stop the school shootings. Well, where are these people, every weekend in St. Louis and Chicago and Baltimore when 16, 20, 30 people are shot? They don't all die, But if the people were shot in the same location, it would be considered a mass shooting if there were more than 4. Every weekend in St. Louis, more than 4 people are shot. Every weekend in Chicago, more than 4 people are shot. But because they aren't shot in the same location by the same person, it's not newsworthy. It won't make CNN. It won't make MSNBC. And if you bring it up, well, you're just using whataboutism to excuse the police. Not really. I posit that the way we get other communities to care about what's happening in the Black community is that we have a single-minded effort aimed at changing that murder rate. But it's not, the murder rate isn't really the target, is it? It's the policies that enable these murderers to operate with impunity and not be investigated, arrested, charged, tried, convicted, and imprisoned and taken off the streets. It's also a really pernicious problem that is really tied closely to socioeconomics. The more poverty there is, the less familial cohesion, or reverse that. The fewer fathers are in the home, the more socioeconomic degradation there is, the more likely it is that children will get jumped into gangs and become violent criminals themselves. The more likely they live in a school district that is unaccredited, provisionally unaccredited, or recently reaccredited, but is still a garbage school district. All of these things go together. And so we have to tackle these issues in those communities. And for people, we all care most about ourselves. That is, you talk to psychologists, you talk to any expert, they'll tell you we most care about ourselves. First, our physical single self, and then our family unit, and then the community that we inhabit, whatever that community is. And so often when you bring up the Black on Black crime or the inner city crime rate, suburban dwellers are like, well, it's horrible, but what can we do? We have other bigger problems. We have bigger issues, yada, yada, yada. Yeah, we do. We have a lot of issues, and we can hold more than one thing in our brains. But what we're seeing now is proof that what so many have said, I'm talking about Thomas Sowell and Walter Williams and go all the way back, Condoleezza Rice, Colin Powell back when he was a Republican. Everyone has said that the problems that you see in inner cities, you give it a generation or two and it's out in the suburbs. So why do we care about what happens in inner cities? Because those problems will be our problems shortly. It's traveling outwards. It's coming to us. And as Christians, we should care because they're members of the body of Christ. Different members, of course, because just like your eye is nothing like your foot, another person who lives in another part of the state, city, country, whatever, is not going to be exactly like you, but they're still a part of the body. So we have to care. All right, I got off on a tangent there. We have 2 guests today, Jay Cost, who is an author, and Bob Moffit of the Heritage Foundation. We'll be back with Jay Cost right after these important messages. Keep it here.
80% of the time, an abortion-minded mother who views an ultrasound or sonogram of her baby will choose life. Here's the story of Candace.
The sonogram sealed the deal for me. My baby was like this tiny little spectrum of hope. And I saw his heart beating on the screen. And knowing that there's life growing inside, that sonogram changed my life. I went from just Candace to Mom. Thank you to everybody that has given these gifts. You guys are giving more than money. You guys are giving love.
There are currently preborn centers which do not have an ultrasound machine. Would you sponsor a machine today? Dial pound 250 and say keyword baby. That's pound 250 and say baby. Or go to preborn.com. That's preborn.com. Your love could save a life.
Hi, I'm Crawford Loritz with a legacy moment. The other day, I heard of a young couple whose infant son had a serious condition involving his intestines and other problems. Surgery was going to be extremely dangerous, but if they didn't do the surgery, death was certain. So this young couple said, all we can do was place our little sick baby in God's hands. Well, God answered their prayers and the surgery was successful. There are times in which everything is out of our control and we're in God's hands. David experienced that in 2 Samuel chapter 15, verses 24 through 27. His son Absalom was out to get him, so Jerusalem was in the rearview mirror of David's chariot, so to speak. Listen to these words. Now behold, Zadok also came, and all the Levites with him, carrying the ark of the covenant of God. And the king said to Zadok, return the ark of the God to the city. If I find favor in the sight of the Lord, then he will bring me back again and show me both it and his habitation. But if he should say thus, I have no delight in you, behold, here I am. Let him do to me as seems good to him. I want to list just 3 implications from this instance in David's life. Number 1, do what is right no matter what. For David, that meant the ark belongs back in Jerusalem. No matter what, do what's right. Number 2, don't try to manipulate God's will. Don't try to manipulate God. Instead, surrender to whatever he wants. Then number 3, rest in the realization that he will do what is best. Now, here's what I want you to remember today. God sometimes takes things out of our hands to teach us that his hands alone are on the controls. Stand back and let God do his job.
Crawford Loritz is senior pastor of Fellowship Bible Church in suburban Atlanta, Georgia. For more information, go to livingalegacy.org.
Welcome back to Stacy on the Right.
Welcome back to the program, everybody. Thanks for being here today. StacyOnTheRight.com is the website where you can subscribe and also get the really fun Stacy on the Right Show mug. If you ordered one, they're going out tonight. So right now it's my pleasure to welcome Jay Cost, author of The Price of Greatness, Alexander Hamilton, James Madison, and the Creation of American Oligarchy. He's a senior writer for the Weekly Standard. Jay, thanks for joining us today.
Thanks for having me, Stacy.
Yeah, so let's talk about this book. That's quite a mouthful there. What did you write?
Well, the book is a history of this tumultuous relationship between these two giants of the American founding. James Madison and Alexander Hamilton were instrumental in creating the Constitution, the instrument of government. The Constitution is actually the longest running active written constitution in the nation. And the two of them were integral in writing it, defending it, and putting it together. But after the Constitution was ratified and the new government got underway, the two had this epic falling out, and it really got down to big ideas that continue to define our politics in a lot of ways.
Okay, so the epic falling out, which we all know about from, our history lessons when we're, back in middle school and high school, how does it kind of mirror things that we see today in our current politics or more recent political relationships?
Sure. Well, Hamilton had this really brilliant idea for advancing the American economy. Because, now America is the largest economy in the world. But back when the country was founded, it was really just a backwater. But Hamilton had this great idea, which was that if we favor the wealthy, because there was just a handful of people in the country who actually had money, if we favor them with public policy, with our banking policy and our debt policy and our industrial policy, like our tax policy, they will in turn bet on the success of the nation, and they'll help develop the economy. It was a really brilliant idea that was vindicated over the ensuing century. The problem is that it was really, frankly, unfair. It was very elitist, and as the title of my book suggests, it was an oligarchy. It led to a rule by the rich, which was Madison's big objection to Hamilton's idea. And I think that continues to be a certain trade-off that we have to make today. If you look at, for instance, tax policy, when we talk about targeted tax cuts to this group or that group, oftentimes what the government is doing is playing favorites to one faction or another. And sometimes they'll say, oh, well, we have the best ideas or we have the best intentions at heart. This will help grow the nation. But there's a real kind of partiality to public policy nowadays that I think you can see in the early republic.
Okay. So, but did it work? Did this kind of nod to wealthier people, was that integral to the growth of our economy from a backwater into what is now the strongest economy on the face of the planet? or was it in spite of that?
No, it really was essential, particularly on banking and the creation of a currency. I mean, nowadays, we just, we have dollars in our wallet. We just completely take it for granted. But America's financial system and its currency system really was a complete disaster when the country was founded. I mean, there was no such thing as a currency. And in fact, what you had was state governments, 13 states would just print dollars that really were like worth nothing. So what Hamilton was able to do by creating a stable currency, really, I mean, you need to have a stable, reliable currency for economic growth. I mean, if people can't count on the value of a dollar, then it's going to just get in the way of everything. So that was really essential. Because the ironic thing is, and this is sort of gets to the title of the book, The Price of Greatness, is that Madison's criticisms were right as well. I mean, Hamilton was right on the economics, but Madison was right on the politics, that this led to corruption, it led to rule by the rich, and that there was a genuine trade-off between economic growth and equal government, equal protection, and equal the government distributing the benefits and burdens of public policy in a fair and equitable way, that there was really a trade-off to be made.
So it worked, but now we have a completely different society. We have, a lot of what people call inequality, which I hate that. I hate it when people talk about wealth inequality, because the idea that everyone would have the same amount of money is so antithetical to the founding of this country, the ideals that we have, that everyone can, work as hard as they want or as little as they want, and no one's going to be made to do anything. It's a ridiculous concept to hold both of those in the same brain, but, there it is. But when we talk about how huge our social safety net is now, and how really our progressive tax system actually punishes wealthier individuals by taking more of what they earn. The more you earn, the more the government not only just takes, but feels entitled to, and they search around for ways to even take away the loopholes that allow you to keep more of it, like the alternative minimum tax is my favorite one. You make a ton of money. We weren't making a ton of money before. You get into a place where you're in a no man's zone where they feel like they're owed more money, so they collect an extra $5,000 or $6,000 a year from you because the alternative minimum tax is more than what you really owe. It's the craziest thing ever, in my opinion.
Yeah, well, I totally agree with that. The alternative minimum tax is just a terrible tax. I think there's two ways to think about inequality, or at least there are at least two ways, right? There's the one which you suggested, is that people are entitled to the fruits of their own labor, and that economic inequality is good in the long run for society because it's just a byproduct of capitalism, which in the long haul advances everybody's economic interests over the long haul. I mean, you take the wealthiest person who lived, say, 100 years ago, they didn't have access to the conveniences that the poorest among us have right now. I mean, that's how capitalism works on the long haul. But I think there's another way to think about this, and it's political inequality. And the idea being, should the wealthy have, or should certain groups of people have special access to government? Should they get their telephone calls answered before the average citizen? Should certain people, by virtue of how much money they make, by where they live, by what they do, should they have special privileges when it comes to politics? And I think that is a dimension of political debate that was really very relevant when the country was founded, and I think that remains relevant today. Like, I think if you ask most people, I think that most people agree with what you were saying, is that people should be entitled to the fruits of their own labor, and that the frustration with sort of the wealthy is nowadays it's more, I think, wrapped up in this idea that, well, if you're wealthy, you can basically buy a seat at the table, which in a republic you really shouldn't be able to do.
I agree with you, but I think the way that Washington, D.C. is currently set up, so that the members now have admitted over the past couple of years, Jason Chaffetz kind of started the ball rolling, and many of them have admitted that after the House, everybody in the House, once they're elected, they almost immediately begin to fundraise for the next election because it's 2 years away. 2 years in political time is both an eternity and a blink of an eye. They have certain hours of every single day that they have to almost go into like a little booth or a tiny, air-controlled room and call, 100 people on this list or 30 people on this list to get them to say yes. The people on that list who are giving the larger dollars, they expect something in return for what they've given. And so it sets up this system that you've described, which is, it's political patronage. You're owned by the people who write you the biggest checks, the ones who attend your $30,000 a plate dinners and so on and so forth, which means people like me, I'm not getting return phone calls. Well, obviously, as being a person of the media, I can get a few return phone calls, but I'm not getting the kind of attention someone who wrote a check for 30 grand is getting. And so how do you undo that? Like, that is the big question that the Tea Party failed to execute on. They tried. That movement really got close to at least making people more aware. But what do we do about that?
Yeah, that's a good question. I like to call it a conflict of interest financing of politics is what it is. So, because it's not just when those members of Congress go into a booth and start making telephone calls, they're not just calling random wealthy people. If you if you're on the Energy and Commerce Committee and you have oversight over, say, the aerospace industry, who's going to be the first people on the list you're going to call? It's going to be people in the aerospace industry, right? People who have business before whatever little subcommittee you're in control of, right? And that is a really unfortunate thing because it ends up being that interest groups have this kind of political power that it doesn't correspond to their numbers in the broader public, And so, and oftentimes this stuff happens at such a granular level that average citizens, it's completely below the radar. Like, you can be an expert in civics and study government for a living and still not have any idea of what they're actually doing in these committees. And more importantly, in the meetings that happen when the committee's not in session. And I think that one of the things that we have to recognize, and I agree with you, I don't think the Tea Party reckoned with this, is that we need to recognize, number one, it is expensive to campaign for public office. It's just a lot of money. And number two, if we don't make due provision for that, politicians are going to find that money somewhere. And right now they're finding it from interest groups that have business before the government, which is, I think, almost one of the worst ways you can finance politics.
Yeah, it is. Because when you talk about the list that people are utilizing, some of it is the list that the lists that are built by party apparatus, et cetera, et cetera. Some of it is those donor lists that are cultivated by people who've been in politics for a long time. And those are two sources where I don't think a lot of people would have a problem with that. Like, if you took a camera and a microphone out on the street, people would find those lists to be logical. But when you explain the list you just described, where you're on this committee, it's one of the most powerful committees in Congress, commerce or something like that. Then you call the people who, let's say you're on defense, intelligence and defense or something like that. You're calling people in the defense industry. You're calling people who they literally are going to make billions of dollars based on your votes, or they're going to make millions. That's a huge difference. I think people on the street would be upset about, right?
Absolutely. And the previous book that I wrote was called A Republic No More, and it talked about this in detail. And one of the most astonishing examples of this that I found was a lobbyist who was in front of a group of students at a college somewhere, and he said, well, what's the most important vote? They asked this lobbyist who was a defense contractor lobbyist, what's the most important vote that you ever got? And she said, it wasn't a vote. I got behind the scenes in a markup hearing, I got them to buy my company's missiles for $30 million rather than $20 million, right? And our government spends trillions of dollars every year, right? So $10 million isn't that much of a difference. But if you multiply that, again, all through Congress and all these different committees are doing the same thing again and again and again. It's just a huge problem. It's really dangerous to have our politics paid for by people with business before the government. And by the way, it's not just campaign finance. Here's the revolving door. So, for instance, if my former member of Congress when he left Congress, he got voted out in the Tea Party wave in 2010. He didn't come back home. He went and became a lobbyist for the health industry. That's a very common occurrence as well. And you have to reckon that if you're a member of Congress and you're looking at retirement and you're thinking, well, I want to get a job at the health industry, are you going to take a vote to anger your prospective employer? Of course you're not. And if you're not willing to do that for the good of your constituents, then whose side are you really on?
Which is why, Jay, sometimes when, you're sending someone, you found this great candidate, right? This person they've got all the right knowledge points. They're from a background that you can identify with, and they have momentum in the state, and you want to send them to the Senate or the House. And then you kind of look back at the others that you sent. Like this has happened to me recently quite a few times where I'm like, I was so excited about this person. They've been there for 4 years, 6 years, whatever. And I don't see them doing the stuff that they promised on the campaign trail. I mean, you've sat with these people around a table, and really listened to them talk about why they're running. And within a year of them going there, when they come back, they've been zombified. They're straight up Washington. And so it's like, it feels like there isn't any fix, because the idea of our representative republic is you send someone that you believe in to DC and they represent you. But these people don't represent us after they get there, because you've just described why they don't. Like, it's kind of an impossibility, frustrating thing.
Yeah. It's the old saying, they went into politics to do good and they ended up doing very, very well. Look, it's a real problem, and it's become a real problem. The larger the government has gotten and the wealthier the country has become, there are more opportunities for politicians to enrich themselves through public service, right? And it might not just be money. I mean, you think of it more broadly. Think of it in terms of honor, right? People looking up to you and thinking, wow, that guy's really important. That's a real motivating force in human life. And a lot of times these guys go to Washington, D.C., and they're like nobodies, but then they get there, and everybody's taking their calls, and everybody's interested in what they're saying, and everybody sort of snaps to when they walk into a room. That is really alluring, and it has what I would say, as you described, when we're talking about a representative republic, that is a corrupting influence on Republican self-government.
Wow. Great interview. Thank you, Jay, for coming on. I put the link to your book all over. People can buy it at the link at Amazon. Thank you for writing it, and thank you for your time today.
Oh, thank you so much for having me, Stacey.
All right. Talk again soon. Jay Koss, author of The Price of Greatness and senior writer for The Weekly Standard, theweeklystandard.com. Hey, we'll be back with more after these messages.
This is Uncommon Moments. Here's former Super Bowl winning NFL coach Tony Dungy and his wife Lauren sharing from their book Uncommon Marriage.
Taking on too much was not a new challenge for me and Lauren. We had to be aware when we had been running ourselves down. We had noticed that some of our disagreements, especially the major ones, occurred when we were tired.
Sometimes agreeing to disagree worked for us to help us both think about the problem. We put the disagreement aside for the moment until we could talk about it later, when both of us were less tired or emotional. Ephesians 4:26 says, "Don't sin by letting anger control you." The next time you have a disagreement with your spouse, make sure you're communicating with respect and love.
Tony and Lauren Dungy, authors of Uncommon Marriage, learning about lasting love and overcoming life's obstacles together. Discover more at CoachDungy.com.
Listen to Stacey on the Right with Stacey Washington on Urban Family Talk. She's sharp.
I mean, did you hear that?
Pointed.
Remember that you're not only a Christian on Sunday.
And insightful.
Deception and lies have been accepted as the norm from the Democrats.
But most of all, she's on the right.
That scripture from the Bible, it says the heart of the fool inclines to the left, just kept popping into my mind.
Stacey on the Right. Now heard weekday afternoons from 2 to 4 Central on Urban Family Talk. Who is today's urban woman?
Today's urban woman is about empowering herself, empowering her family to empower our future. We have a wealth of opportunities here in America. There are no excuses. Everyone should be able to empower themselves, educate themselves, and be stewards of our society. Today's urban woman, here to stay, and we're moving forward, never looking backward. I'm Deneen Borelli, and I am today's urban woman.
This is Just a Minute with Stacey Washington. As if college students aren't already totally triggered, George Washington University hosted a workshop for students and faculty on the unmerited perks and favors showered upon white Christians, which are unavailable to everyone else. The Multicultural Student Services Center wants to teach minority students they are dupes. Meaningless buzzwords like ally, unconscious bias, and microaggression were employed for this purpose. The Bible is very clear that we are indeed privileged to be the beneficiaries of Jesus Christ's great work on the cross. We are also called to suffer with him, which is a privilege. Christianity is open to everyone, period. Wouldn't it be great if GWU got out of the business of oppressor talk and back to teaching higher ed? Because that is what the parents of those students are paying tuition for. I'm Stacey Washington. Find out more at StaceyOnTheRight.com.
This is Stacey on the Right on Urban Family Talk.
So, what does that mean right now, and what does it portend about how much or how aggressively Republican candidates use the commander-in-chief, the president? Karl Rove with some thoughts on that. What do you think, Karl?
Well, look, California is good news for Republicans. The Democrats targeted 7 Republican districts that were won by Hillary Clinton, but were occupied by a Republican. A couple of those are retirements. In 6 of the 7, the combined Republican vote was bigger than the Democratic vote by margins of 4 points to 22 points. And because the jungle primary tends to draw more of what looks like a general election electorate out, you know, everybody runs in one big mess, and the 2 top vote getters, regardless of party, go into a general election. So the turnout is higher, 21% in, for example, in California versus 11% in New Jersey turnout the same night. This is good news for the Republicans. They look like they got in these districts that the Democrats hope to win. There's not a blue wave that's sinking them. In fact, the Republican enthusiasm is as good or higher than the Democrats in 6 of the 7 districts.
Ooh, that was a really great election rundown on the California primary and just really debunking this whole idea that was started in January when poll numbers were quite different, that the Democrats are just going to roll right over the Republicans and there is no hope. And that was, of course, news that made sense in the very, very, very moment of its issuance, because Paul Ryan had announced that he was leaving and not running for re-election. And he announced early, which some people saw as a bellwether, you know, a panic button being pushed on the side of the Republicans. Hey, look at all of these retirements. Look at all these people who are leaving the new Trump Republican Party. And that means danger for the Republicans, when in reality, we're now seeing that voter enthusiasm is pretty equally matched on both sides. Everybody is either digging in their heels and saying, look, that we want to keep this direction we're currently on. That's on the right. And people on the left are saying, we want to resist. We want to remove these people. We want higher taxes. We want, you know, less strength abroad, less freedom here at home. We want more command and control from the government. And that's on the left. So it's interesting to hear Karl Rove's assessment. Now, I want to listen to the rest of what he has to say. People feel good about the economy and are pretty good, feel pretty positively about their circumstances. And I think he's right. But again, will that translate into the wins, or will it translate into losses in November? I guess it remains to be seen. It's number 5.
You know, it's interesting as we've gone to this double-digit differential between, you know, voters and their perception of who should control Congress in favor of Democrats, to now within the margin of error a few single points. Does that mean to you, and I know things can change mightily in the months ahead, that even if the Democrats were to gain seats in the House, it will not be nearly enough to tip the balance of power?
Well, if the election were today, the dynamic is that I think that might be the case. They would either take it very narrowly by 1 or 2 seats or lose it. Think about it. Since the 21st of December, the generic gap in the Real Clear Politics average was 13 points. Today, it's just over 3. President's job approval in the middle of December was it was 37-38. Today, it's 43-44. Still not great, but a heck of a lot better than it was before. And then what you were talking about earlier, the underlying view of the economy. Now, the president exaggerates that it's the best economy we've ever had, but people are feeling pretty good about the economy and pretty good about their own personal circumstances. So all 3 of those things, plus foreign policy. I think that people have looked in the last couple of months and realized things can change dramatically, but they look at Syria, what the tough action he took there, getting out of the Iran nuclear deal, the North Korea so far, it's been a little ragged, but it looks like he's making progress. Now, you're right. 5 months between now and the election is like an eternity in politics, right. Several geological ages, but going in the right direction and presaging that this is not likely to be a year with a big blue wave. It's more like to be the anniversary that we're celebrating the 100th anniversary of World War I. This looks like trench warfare, race by race, district by district. How good your candidate, how good is their campaign, and can they withstand the Democrats in this election year? And it's going to be hand-to-hand combat right through November.
And so the first thing I think of when I hear Karl Rove talking about the fundamentals of the candidates, how well can they represent the party, how well can they represent the platform, because those are actually 2 different things. I think it's worth noting that representing the party, as in the Republican Party, can be interpreted in many different ways. Look at John McCain and Jeff Flake and Corker. There's a ton of different people out there who call themselves Republicans, but I would dare say, I'm not sure if they've read the party platform recently. So it's important to say, instead of representing the party, how about representing that platform, the platform that was approved in the 2016 campaign, the platform that talks about a strong national defense, supporting the Second Amendment, the pro-life. It's literally a pro-life platform, and other things that are in there that are really important. Bedrock Republican principles: controlling the border, adhering to our immigration laws, adhering to all of our laws, and equally applying them, having a blind judicial system that basically doesn't reward people based on their socioeconomic status or punish people based on their socioeconomic status. That's important. And I see in some races, specifically here in Missouri, we've had a real kind of groundswell of support up here for, in our case, it's the Senate race that is so important. And we're talking about unseating Claire McCaskill, and it's of national, Claire McCaskill was deciding, she was the vote that tipped the scales in favor of Obamacare. There's been many times where she could have voted to represent the constituents of the state of Missouri, which means moderate herself as a Democrat. And instead, she chose to go hard to the left and support those hard left policies that have since been shown to be huge failures. And so unseating her is important to getting things done, getting Planned Parenthood defunded, getting the border controlled. A lot of things hinge on replacing her with a strong conservative vote. And we have, a couple of people contending. There's like a ton of candidates, but the 2 front runners, obviously there's Attorney General Josh Hawley, who is he's strong on the party platform. And we will be having him on the show. We had a scheduling conflict for him for yesterday, and so he wasn't on. So next week, we're looking to try to figure the schedules out again and get him on here so you can hear from him directly. But there's a second person behind him. They're kind of neck and neck. It depends on what poll you're looking at. Some of the polls show Josh Hawley is dusting that field. There is no one who's even close to him. And it's Austin Peterson. And he's a young guy, very, very smooth presentation. But he is definitely not a person who adheres to the Republican Party platform. And he's said some pretty horrible things about Donald Trump in the past. Now, he may have moderated on those, and that's fine. He's welcome to say and believe whatever he'd like, but he's truly a libertarian, which means he doesn't believe in border walls. He doesn't believe in border fencing. He believes, that that's not something we should focus our efforts on. We have other bigger fish to fry. He's also not as strong on the religious freedom issue because he's agnostic. So when I hear Karl Rove talking about people representing the party, representing the platform, being able to then come out of the primary and go into the general and run that strong campaign against, because Claire McCaskill, as weak as she's being painted with the polls and her previous votes and the public perception of her, she is a very strong candidate. She has an excellent campaign apparatus. She has a rabid base of support on the hard left. And she's a masterful manipulator of circumstances to her own advantage. She's an attorney. She's wealthy. She knows the ways and means of the Washington apparatus as well as Democratic politics in the state of Missouri. Underestimating her means you plan to lose. So we have to have someone who's going in against her, who is aware of her strengths, who can capitalize on her weaknesses, and doesn't have to patch or paper over their own deficiencies when it comes to getting people to say, look, I'm voting for you, I'm behind you, because they're weak on the border. The border was actually the pivotal campaign issue for Donald Trump. He won the state of Missouri by double digits. His coattails were so strong, everyone on the Republican side underneath down ballot flew into office. It was almost as if they ran unopposed. Now we're talking about the midterm. Different lay of the land, and the Democrats have been organizing. They have been working very hard behind the scenes to activate their voters. So it's going to be a true contest. It's not going to be an easy win for either side. And so what I'm looking for is for, you're going to vote for whoever you feel led to vote for. But informing yourself beforehand is to me paramount. And as Christians, that is, we're called to render unto Caesar that which is Caesar. So, make sure you know who it is that you're supporting, and that support coming out of the primary, that primary candidate is going to go up against whoever their opponent is in the general on the opposing side of the aisle. And that's the contest that you're going to be supporting. You're going to be supporting one side or the other. There's no equivocating here. So I'm hoping that people will be informed and will consider all of the variables, not just, well, I don't want, I just don't want someone who is a politician. Well, whether you want a person who's a politician or not, once they are elected, they are a politician. Donald Trump, businessman, is now Donald Trump, president of the United States, and he is a politician. So, think it through. So that being said, it was good. I'm not the biggest Karl Rove person, but that was good analysis. Now I want to listen to Sarah Sanders, who has she's under direct assault by the left. There are a number of hit pieces, really nasty, kind of high school gossip rag type pieces about her in a number of publications. And I can tell you right now here's the goal. The left has seen her effectiveness now, and they are unable to get her to knuckle under to their continued attempts to make every time that they spend in the briefing room about how Donald Trump is just a mean old nasty Cheeto. They can't do it. She is prepared when she enters that room. They've mocked her. They've mocked her appearance. They've attacked her family. They've attacked her weight. They've attacked her intellect. They've attacked her moral standing by calling her a liar, a professional liar. They've gotten people to do it that it should have worked. Every time they undertake a new attack against Sarah Sanders, it's as if they're like, yep, but she wasn't really weakened by the last one, but now we've got her. This latest round of attacks is, to me, kind of a desperate last gasp, because they were able to take out Sean Spicer. They hated him, and they were able to take him out. They've not been so successful with Sarah Sanders. So here she is on this new evening program with Chris Cuomo, who apparently is an attorney. He's really happy to share with us over and over and over again during this interview. I suffered through all 19 minutes and some seconds earlier today, and it was a true effort. But I was able to find this audio for you where Sanders, honestly, it's amazing to believe that she willingly went to this interview, but she did. And she talks about how the Democrats hate Trump more than they love America and don't have a message, it's number 6.
Are you enjoying your job?
I am, and even in moments when I come on CNN, because I love our country, I think the president's doing a tremendous job, and we are, I think, moving the ball down the field in a way that it hasn't been done in a long time.
And are you okay with how you're doing it?
I mean, I think things are going pretty well. Again, I think that the country is moving in the right direction, and it's doing that under the president's leadership, and I'm proud to be a part of that. And I think some really great things have happened over these first 500 days, and I think a lot of great things are going to take place over the next 6.5 years.
Do you believe that this is sustainable, this dynamic where we come at you with questions about what's true and what isn't, and those questions don't get answered? Do you think that by saying we stink, that we don't like veterans, that we are bad for America, the president says that we're enemies of America, do you think that that works for you long term?
Look, what I think is important to remember is that you guys get to ask the questions, but you can't always complain about the answers. You constantly ask the same question over and over and over again.
That's the job.
And expect different answers.
That's the
and
job.
then get mad when the answers don't change. No, the job is to get information and report the news. Unfortunately, you guys quit reporting the news. When I can read a news story and I have no idea what side of the story the reporter is on, that's a good news story. You'll be hard-pressed to find a lot of news that looks like that
That
anymore
assumes that the story is completely even-handed, that one side isn't one more right than other, that something isn't demonstrably true,
No, your
that
job
everything
isn't
is unknown.
The news
That's
isn't
not the truth.
opinions. The
That's
news
not the
isn't an
truth.
opinion.
Of course the news isn't
is
an opinion.
reporting facts and letting other people make the decision
That's
about
right.
how they
And if
feel
you
about
won't
it.
answer the questions, Sarah, how can people do that?
I answer questions all day, every day.
And if
it's
they-
what I spend every minute of the
I
day
know you
doing.
do.
That's why I'm sitting here at 9 o'clock at night answering questions.
She got him. All right, we'll be back with hour 2 after these important messages from onenewsnow.com. Keep it here.
Urban Family Talk. Urban Family Talk.
The sexual revolution is falsely promised to satisfy the human heart.
God has a better way if we follow God's prescription.
Dr. Michael Brown offers hope for those trapped in the downward spiral of sexual immorality. The Freedom of Sexual Purity is a powerful DVD from the AFA Cultural Institute. Get your copy today at afastore.net.
Truth. Wisdom. Empowered Urban Family Talk. A ministry of the American Family Association.
For American Family News on the Hour, I'm Chris Woodward. President Donald Trump says he is well prepared for his upcoming sit-down with North Korea's Kim Jong-un, adding he does not believe he needs much preparation for the summit. Trump told reporters, quote, "I don't think I have to prepare very much." Of the summit set for June 12th in Singapore, Trump said it's going to be much more than a photo op. The CDC has released a new report on suicides. Fox's Tanya J. Powers has more.
Suicide rates are on the rise in nearly every state, according to a report by the Centers for Disease Control and Prevention. It's the 10th leading cause of death, and it's in the top 3 causes that are on the rise. The study finds in 2016, nearly 45,000 Americans aged 10 or older died by suicide. CDC Principal Deputy Director Ann Schuchat says money problems are one of the big factors.
We do see increases in suicides associated with economic downturns.
Researchers say more than half of people who died by suicide did not have a known diagnosed mental health condition at the time of their death. Firearms were the most common method of suicide used. Tanya J. Powers, Fox News.
Parents and families are becoming more interested in homeschooling, and not just for curriculum reasons. Speaking to Sandy Rios in the morning on AFR Talk, Tim Lambert of the Texas Homeschool Coalition said people are concerned about safety.
We have a group of folks who take calls and emails for us, and until about March, we were averaging about 600 or 700 calls and emails per month, and those range from anything from, I want to pull my kids out, how do I do that, to general information about homeschooling. And in March, after the Parkland shooting, those inquiries doubled. So we're getting and continue to have gotten between 12 and 1,400 calls a month. And a lot of those folks really cite the the issue of safety.
Moral education is also a concern for people seeking information about homeschooling. And that's according to a scientific poll of homeschoolers conducted last year in Texas by the Homeschool Coalition. The Philadelphia 76ers say team president Brian Colangelo is out over a Twitter scandal.
The 76ers organization says it's accepted Brian Colangelo's resignation as president of basketball operations after the team launched an independent investigation into burner Twitter accounts and allegations that Colangelo used the accounts to anonymously trash some of his own players and fellow 76ers execs. The team says that Colangelo offered his resignation recognizing the detrimental impact the matter has had on the organization. The 76ers say head coach Brett Brown will oversee basketball operations on an interim basis. Jeff Manasso, Fox News.
A full circle moment for a New Jersey state trooper who had a chance traffic stop with a retired cop. Fox's Derek Dennis has that story.
What are the odds New Jersey State Trooper Michael Patterson would meet the stranger who helped bring him into the world 27 years ago? And they would both have another connection, law enforcement. You see, retired Piscataway, New Jersey police officer Matthew Bailey was a rookie cop back in the 90s when duty called for him to help a woman in labor at her home. That baby grew up to be Trooper Patterson, who, as luck would have it, pulled Bailey over on a recent traffic stop for driving with tinted windows. The friendly pullover got the men talking. Bailey mentioned he was a retired officer. Patterson mentioned the street he grew up on and the house where he was born, and that a police officer helped his mom give birth. They put two and two together, connected the dots, and realized their unbelievable connection. Trooper Patterson says the coincidental reunion is like hitting the lottery or being struck by lightning with a happy ending. Derek Dennis, Fox News.
And Starbucks is raising the price of a regular drip coffee by 10 cents to 20 cents in most U.S. stores, putting a small brewed coffee at $1.95 to $2.15 in most locations. Starbucks says it is always evaluating prices and that the latest change was not related to last week's store closures and trainings. The company had closed its U.S. stores for several hours last week to train employees on bias awareness after an outcry over the arrest of two black men in Philadelphia who were waiting on someone in a location and were not buying anything. For more news and information, visit onenewsnow.com.
Family is an institution set forth by God, one man and one woman for life, with the outflow being children produced by that union. It's obvious to all that there is an attack on the family in our country, and especially on fathers. Whether it's the cycle of sin that persists in our families or the pressure from our government to exclude men from being intimately involved, the strategic battle is on for the souls of men. Join us in the battle to strengthen fatherhood. UrbanFamilyTalk.com.
Welcome to Stacy on the Right with your host, Stacy Washington.
Welcome, Mr. Secretary. Thank you. Good to be with you again. All right. First off, you are in Detroit to open the first Envision Center, which helps people living in, I guess, challenging circumstances. Tell me what your vision here is for this.
Well, basically, there's a verse in the Bible that says, without a vision, the people perish. And there are a lot of people who really don't have a vision, have become somewhat hopeless, and just they don't think that life is going to be great to them. And there are actually a lot of resources in our society and a lot of people with very good hearts who would love to do things, but there's not a mechanism to do it. So what we're doing is bringing in juxtaposition the resources to the need. And this is going to be done in communities throughout the country. This is the opening salvo today. Right. And almost all the federal agencies are involved, many sub-agencies as well as state and local and nonprofits and faith-based organizations. This is the largest coordination of all of those things in an attempt to provide the wraparound services that are necessary for success in our society. A lot of people who are born into good circumstances, they have all of this already. Yeah. They have a nurturing family, extended family, sure, a community, and it makes a big difference in the trajectory of their lives. But other people don't have that. We're in the process of putting that into their lives because we have to develop our people. We only have 330 million people. China, India have 4 times that many people. We will never be able to compete into the future if we don't begin to develop all of our people.
Welcome back to Stacy on the Right here on American Family Radio and Urban Family Talk. In this hour of the program, we're going to be speaking to Bob Moffit of the Heritage Foundation about the insolvency of Medicare and our Social Security. And then we're also going to be just getting into a little bit more of the political aspects of Newt Gingrich saying that he's been calling for it for a while, that we need to eliminate the press briefing because it's simply theater for journalists who sit and wait for opportunities to embarrass not just the Trump administration, but specifically Sarah Huckabee Sanders through unwarranted attacks. And so right now, just now you heard HUD Secretary Dr. Ben Carson talking about their latest effort to bring certain segments of our society to par because we are actually in an international competition with other countries that have far greater populations than ours that are actually graduating from college, more people than we have in our country. India graduates more people from college, from university every year than the population of our entire country. That's been the truth for a number of decades now. And these people are graduating, and as their countries are moving up the industrialization ladders, the modernization of their societies, their economies will continue to grow. It's not that America doesn't want to see other economies grow, but we want to maintain our position in the world. It's one of leadership and it's one of guidance for other nations. And we're able to offer so much to other countries because we have such a large economy and such a great society. It's a blessing, and we are able to bless others because of that. But we can't keep up if more and more of our citizens are falling behind and not keeping up basic standards of education and wealth attainment. They're not keeping up with the American dream. And so this is an effort which, honestly, I would think that so many in the media and on the left would applaud the efforts of Dr. Carson to make these specific changes that help people to escape poverty. It's as if Donald Trump really isn't the big, huge racist they keep saying he is. There are other things to run on in November besides Donald Trump being a racist. But anyway, so the Envision centers that Dr. Carson mentioned, if you go to HUD.gov, you can see they've rolled out an entire section of the website, home/Envision centers, and they have these different things they're looking to help people work through. And so just to give you the highlights, the Envision Centers will provide communities with a centralized hub for support in the following 4 pillars: economic empowerment, educational advancement, health and wellness, and character and leadership. Now, why do we even need these centers? Well, Dr. Carson just hit it on the head. If you don't have an intact family and extended family, a lot of the things that happen to people in their 20s when you lose your first job or you move to another city or you move back home. Well, home is usually a place where you have extended family that can kind of help you out so that you have that support system, and it makes life easier. But if you're without those things, then life isn't easier. It's like the law of every bad thing that can happen to you, and it just piles on over and over and over again. So Dr. Carson is trying to create systems that can kind of come alongside people who need a little bit of additional help. The money's already there and it's being spent. He's reallocating it to what he feels are better and higher priorities for people that will actually show tangible results. So he goes on, Fox and Friends, to talk about the Envision centers, and invariably they end up asking him about Roseanne. It's number 3.
We want to get back to civility because that is something that you are very passionate about. And you were just talking about people with big hearts. And this country is full of people with big hearts. But you go back to last week and there was so much hatred. You had Roseanne Barr's tweet. She was then fired. You had Samantha Bee. The list goes on and on. You spoke on Monday night in Stamford, Connecticut. And you talked about the importance of civility. You said it is from within all of us to change that.
Well, it's also an essential element to our long-term survival. This country is extremely strong, and it cannot really be brought down from the outside, very much like the Roman Empire. But it can be destroyed from within, and we have elements who are driving wedges between people on the basis of race, income, religion, gender, political affiliation, you name it. there is never a good outcome to that in a society. And we have to start looking beyond politics and not allowing ourselves to be manipulated, because, as I said, the large majority of people are willing to extend a helping hand.
Okay, so he gave a great answer there. And so with that, I want to pivot over to this. This is a story that I never thought I would see anywhere. And that is this brouhaha over Kim Kardashian getting an influencer award. So I saw a number of, like Page Six has this little, it's a TV show, but it's online on their website. And they have, hardcore leftists and Hollywood elites and really New York elites. They're on there talking about news of the day. And it's always fashion and, kind of gossip about stars, celebrities, important people, rich people, whatever. And they were talking about this award ceremony where Kim Kardashian West was honored as an influencer last night. And so these things are all happening together. It's weird. They're all happening together in the same time frame. You've got Kanye West coming out. He knows he's got an album that's about to drop, and he starts talking about being a free thinker and loving Donald Trump, which puts his name in the news. And people start, questioning whether or not they can still support him because they hate Trump, but they love Kanye West and his music. Well, since all of that furor and his, newfound love affair with Candace Owens and all of that, he has since dropped the album, and it has, it's been almost begrudging. People have listened to it and they love it. Now, I haven't heard it. It's not my music, but the point is his fan base, they love this new album. So he's gotten a reprieve from the hatred that was kind of building against him because he said he liked, it's just unacceptable. You cannot like Donald Trump. So then he's married to Kim Kardashian West. Kim Kardashian West has been on almost a year-long effort to free a grandmother who was convicted of a non-violent crime of assisting communication between people who were dealing drugs. And it was 22 years ago that she was sentenced to life in prison for this. So Kim Kardashian West became aware of it. She really took this woman on as a cause, and she's been lobbying for the woman to be released from prison. So she traveled to the White House last week. I'm sure you saw all the pictures. I even mentioned it here on the show. What is she doing going to the White House? Well, she went to talk about prison reform, but she also took her celebrity and her husband's newfound love of Donald Trump and connection to him, which is really not newfound. They've actually interacted many times before, from before Donald Trump was ever a political candidate. She used that to get in front of him to ask for this woman's sentence to be commuted or for her to be pardoned. So she had a commutation of her sentence, and her name's Alice Johnson. She's a grandmother. She's, really just been desperate to get out into the world again after serving so many years for this offense that rapists don't even get 22 years in prison. I mean, that's just the truth. So I found it interesting that this morning you've got all of these people saying really nasty things about Kim Kardashian West. So this is the timeline. West comes across Alice Johnson's story in October through a video filmed by Mike.com, hardly a conservative outlet. She feels compelled to put her influence behind the case. She starts paying Johnson's legal fees. She hired her a personal lawyer, Sean Chapman, to oversee the case, lobbied Jared Kushner and the White House for an in-person meeting, and she did this behind the scenes for months. So this is all going on before her husband makes these, statements about Donald Trump, et cetera, et cetera. So updates on Johnson's request are all over her Twitter feed. This is something that's been in her Twitter feed for months, ever since she became aware of the story in October. Then also, because she's a businesswoman, she's also tweeting out about KKW Beauty, her public spat with Rhymefest, who runs a nonprofit formerly named after Kanye West's mother, Donda. All this is going on at the same time. She's got her nude lipsticks and 3 lip liners launching. She's got other things going on at KKW Beauty. And she just keeps this story, this clemency request for this grandmother that she's now funding. She keeps that going in amidst all these business interests and everything else. So then, as is being alleged by a writer at Elle, that it's something, that it was coordinated, that her husband made these statements about Donald Trump to kind of smooth the path for her to have this meeting with him. And I actually don't care if that's the case. What I care about is that there are so many celebrities out there who claim that they care so much about this community or that community. And Kim Kardashian West saw what she felt was an injustice. And I mean, shocking to me as well as everyone else. I'm right there admitting that I was like, why is she meeting with the president? But she did. And she was able to get the release for this woman. And so the backlash has been swift. The New York Post had, I can't read it here on the air, Trump meets rump, and some other words that can't be on here, that Kim Kardashian visits the White House to discuss prison reform with President Trump. And there's just a lot of really negative coverage of her right now, specific to the fact that she got this award. And so I'm talking about this all to highlight the fact that over and over again, we've seen people who've been beloved by the left and Hollywood and the entertainment industry here in America. Donald Trump, Ivanka Trump. She was very popular before her father ran for president. Kim Kardashian, Kanye West, Roseanne Barr, super popular. When these people either declare themselves to be Republicans, run for politics, or interface with Donald Trump, who's the new, he's the new cootie guy, because if you talk to Donald Trump, if you say something positive about him, if you meet with him about a cause that really, Kim Kardashian West has not said she's no longer a Democrat. We don't really know her politics. For all we know, she could be a raging lib. She probably is. But she used her influence to get in front of Donald Trump to get this clemency request before him because she felt the cause was just. And now she's going to have to be excommunicated as well. And the reason I say that is because previous to this, she has been she's been their favorite. She's been someone that they reliably award. In fact, that's what the CFDA award was about. They awarded her the Influencer Award at the CFDA Fashion Awards, where she said, I'm kind of surprised that I'm winning a fashion award when I'm naked most of the time. But now they'll have to excommunicate her because she's proven that she's willing to interface with the President of the United States, who happens to be a Republican. Just think about that for a second. All right, we'll be back with our next guest, Bob Moffit of the Heritage Foundation, right after this. Welcome back to the show. Thank you so much for being with us today. At Stacey on the Right on Twitter and Instagram. You can go to nationalcenter.org and find out more about the Blueprint, A Better Deal for Black America. We are so excited to have that going on. And programming update, I'm going to be filling in for the Hamilton Corner tonight. That's 5 p.m. Central Time. I'll be on his 1-hour program, which is nationally syndicated through American Family Radio. And it's going to be a huge, huge, big show, lots of fun, and really grateful to be able to, fill the seat for him this afternoon. So right now it's my pleasure to welcome Bob Moffit. The Heritage Foundation is one of my favorite organizations. They are the go-to place for information if you need to understand a topic. They not only have the white papers, but they have the experts to come on and explain them. And so it's my pleasure to welcome Bob Moffit. Thank you so much for joining us today.
Stacey, it's a pleasure.
You know, I love learning from policy wonks. I know some people call that they almost use it as an insult, but to me, there's nothing better than someone who takes the time to not just research a subject, but to be an expert on it. And something as difficult as Medicare funding and Social Security insolvency, these are topics that I don't want some, once a week columnist who's only tackling this for one opportunity for 650 words to talk to me about this. I want an expert. So thank you for coming on today.
Well, it's a pleasure.
So let's talk about this. We've known for decades. I remember being a kid and my parents kind of being very sarcastic and caustic over the dinner table about Social Security being insolvent and how ridiculous it was that they had to pay into it if they knew it wasn't going to last. Yet that's still what we're doing. Now I'm paying into it, and I have kids who one of them's working now. She's paying into it. What's the reason behind the continuing? It's getting closer and closer, the insolvency date, and they keep dropping it closer and closer to today.
Yeah, well, as far as Social Security is concerned, I mean, Social Security is actually the easier problem, but it's simply a transfer of money. I mean, there's nothing surprising about this. What we've got is we've got 77 million baby boomers, people who were born between 1946 and 1964. 77 million of them, and now they're retiring at the rate of 10,000 a day. So the Social Security system is under tremendous pressure, of course, to provide these monthly paychecks, and of course they're with a large number of people demanding it, with a larger and larger number of people. On the program, the amount, the time, in other words, the time that we have to pay out what we have been paying out, in other words, the full benefits that people have been promised, is starting to get shorter and shorter, and that's why the Social Security trustees have indicated that the program is going to be insolvent more quickly than we thought it was going to be. But that's not really a great surprise. I mean, a lot of people who have been following this issue have projected that this was going to happen unless we started thinking about reforming this program for the next generation anyway.
So what are those reforms? I've had people on before who've talked about different options, and it usually ends up enraging the listeners because they've paid in and no one wants to hear that they need to retire later. But I've already started talking to not just, my husband for our personal family planning, but I've even talked to our kids about the fact that the idea that you retire when you're 65 is no longer going to be an option for them. Like they have to be mentally prepared before they enter the workforce. And they're still teenagers. 2 of them are still in high school. But I'm talking to them about this because I think there's a really unrealistic expectation that you're going to be retiring at 65 and staying retired for 35 years because, you live to be 90 years old. That's just not sustainable. People have to be prepared to work past 65 years old and to be saving their entire work lives in preparation for whenever they do retire.
Oh, I don't think there's any question about that. I mean, we have not been debating Social Security recently, but I think we're going to have to debate it. But let me address the first question you raised about people who have paid into it all their lives. That's correct. They've worked hard. They paid into it. They feel that they have an entitlement to these benefits, and under the law, they do. There's one problem with this, though, and that is that people have a tendency to think that the money that they paid into the system while they were working is the money that actually finances their benefits. And that is a big mistake. I mean, it's amazing. I mean, we've had Social Security since 1935, but people still don't understand it. The simple principle is Social Security is a pay-as-you-go system. What that means is that the benefits that you get in retirement are benefits that are being paid for by workers who are working today. So it's pay as you go. When you were working in the workforce, you were paying into Social Security, but that money was going to the benefits who were retired, the beneficiaries who were retired while you were working. The problem is that over the years, the number of people who are working compared to the number of people who have been retired is shrinking. This is a real serious problem. You know, back in 1950, all right, back in the good old days, right, 1950, you had about 16 workers for every person who was retired.
Because people had families of 5 kids back then.
You know, three workers to each retiree. And in 2030, it's going to go down to 2 workers for every retiree. And that is the problem. I mean, the baby boomers, there's 77 million of them, but the other fact of the matter is, and it's just a basic demographic fact, is the baby boomers did not replace themselves. That's the reality.
They didn't have enough kids.
You know, our birth rate has been going down, and that is part of the reason why we are facing a demographic crisis in Social Security, and why Social Security is facing some very, very serious financial problems ahead.
And so, in addition to people working longer and really not looking at retirement as something that happens at a specific date, but happens when they've saved enough money to retire, which means they might have to keep working part-time for the rest of their lives, because some people are not going to be able to get that magic. What used to be you need $1 million to retire is now becoming you need $2-3 million. You know, every passing decade will ratchet that number up. But there's also the issue of, you talked about demographics, you talked about the birth rate. As we inch further and further away from, I believe the latest number was 1.7, there are different sectors of our public that have higher birth rates, but overall we're at about 1.7. What people need to be doing, in addition to planning on working longer, is talking to their children about the benefits of having more children. So instead of making child rearing sound like such a burden, instead of making it sound as if large families are an oddity or something to be pitied or something to be horrified by, Americans need to go back to that more traditional approach of saying, you know, we love kids, we love grandkids, we want you to have grandkids, we want to help out, we want to, you know, your grandkids can spend the night at our house on the weekends so you can go on dates, you know, we want you to live in the same town that we live in after college, we want to actually like your wife or your husband or, you know, whoever the kids end up marrying, we want to have a good family unit so we can encourage you to have more kids. I know it takes longer to make population shifts, but it's really the ideas behind it that we have accepted that are wrong, that are bringing us to this point. Would you agree with that? Because I think it's more than one approach.
No, I think family breakdown plus things like abortion have been a disaster for the social insurance systems. You know, we are really having a difficult time of it. If you're a young person, the problem you're faced with is that even if you do pay into Social Security, you're not going to get back the degree of the rate of return for your payment into the system that your grandparents did. I mean, the good news for seniors today is that the older you are, the greater the return on your payroll taxes into the system. The Government Accountability Office, which is the central, you know, auditor of the federal government, has done us a big favor. They track the rates of return for various age groups. And if you were born in, let's say, 1900, like my grandmother was, and you were 35 years of age when when Franklin Roosevelt enacted Social Security, well, when you retired, you got a rate of return of about 15% on that money. You did terrific. You got twice the historical rate of return that anybody gets on the stock market. if you were born in 1920, like the World War II generation, you got a rate of return of about 8%, slightly better than the historic return on stocks, and that's all very good. But if you were born in 1960, the tail end of the baby boom generation, you got a rate of return on your Social Security money of between 2 and 3%. So what may have been satisfactory, 10, 15, 20 years ago, this is the problem young people face, is that it's going to be very poor in the future. The problem is for young Americans who are paying into the system, the return on their tax dollars is going to get progressively smaller. And that is really a serious problem. Every male under the age of 38 is going to lose money in the current Social Security system. And that's just a fact. I mean, this is not a debatable issue. There's no nest egg in the current system. About 20% of males roughly get, 33%. Black males die between the ages of 50 and 70, meaning that they can pay a lifetime worth of payroll taxes into the system, and black males will collect virtually nothing except the death benefit for the widow. This is a problem. I mean, it's a very serious problem.
You're Mr. Daniel Doomsayer right now. This is terrible.
No, I don't believe that there's anything that is insoluble. But what I'm trying to say is that, Congress and the president, and Trump doesn't want to touch this stuff. I mean, he said so. The problem is, the problem is not what we want to do, okay, Stacey?
Yeah.
The problem is the math.
Well, but the math is the thing you can't argue.
It's not a question of what you want or what you think or what you hope or what you desire. The problem is the math.
And math is the one thing that we can't argue because math doesn't
can't.
If
There's
it's
nothing
correct,
I can do about it.
yeah,
2 and 2
it's
are 4.
right. Yeah. So at this point, and I've already heard and I understand. I actually understand why the president is hesitant to wade into this problem, as previous presidents have been. Barack Obama never even, he would barely mention it except to lay blame at the feet of Republicans, which I'm not sure exactly how the Republicans own this since the Democrats emptied the trust fund.
Obama, that is really the tragedy of Barack Obama. Barack Obama is in fact a really smart guy, and he really understands this thing. But neither Social Security nor Medicare, he just simply wouldn't touch it. He made a comment one time that Medicare and Medicaid are going to help drive America's national debt into, he said it, not some Republican. And he said, if we don't reform Medicare, it's not going to be there for generations when they need it. That's not Paul Ryan. That's Barack Obama. But the fact of the matter is, they can talk about it all they want, but the fact of the matter is that they haven't really done anything. And
so what does it look like?
President Clinton. President Clinton said that this was a serious problem. President Clinton, said this is a serious problem. The Comptroller Generals of the United States, the people who run the Governmental Accountability Office, said it. The Greenspan, who was the chairman of the Federal Reserve, prominent members of Congress know this. The American people are going to have to make a big decision about, what we're going to do here.
But what does that look like? The decision you're talking about is raising the retirement age, first of all. That's the first thing that has to happen.
I mean, we've kept the retirement age at 65 since 1935. Now, we raised it for Social Security to 67. A lot of people don't even realize it because it was done right. We gradually raised it over, 15 years, or 10 or 15 years. But in 1983, they decided to raise the normal age of eligibility for Social Security to 67. And so they've done it gradually. That's the right way to do it. But we got to do the same thing with Medicare. If we do nothing and keep the system as it is, you're going to have to accept a worsening cash flow problem. You're going to have to recognize that the baby boomers are well into retirement are going to start running into serious cash flow problems. You're just going to have to recognize that. And then the Social Security system, at some point will be insolvent. Well, the trustees have told us it's going to be insolvent.
So I absolutely think it doesn't have to be as bad as you know, obviously it doesn't have to be as bad as it's been made out to be. And when I say bad, I mean the public relations nightmare that is every time it's brought up, everybody gets upset, and whoever brings it up is immediately almost, you know, burned at the stake. When you talk about raising that limit, you know, you raise the age limit, and it was done back in the 80s, and you said most people probably don't even realize it. That's what needs to happen with the Social Security age. It has to be raised gradually over time.
We got it at 67 now. We raised the age. We used to be 65. For Social Security, the normal age is 67. People have been kind of graduating into it, you know, the older they get. But that's what's happened. Now, that was not painful, frankly.
We need to do it again, and then other
Medicare.
stuff.
If we do it with Medicare, we're starting to talk about big money.
Well, you know, even for a Daniel Doomsayer, you still shared a lot of really great information. I appreciate your time.
Don't misunderstand me. Stacey, don't misunderstand me. There are ways to solve this problem.
I believe you. I just think we need somebody with the stones to get it done.
Well, yeah, no, it can be done. I think, frankly, giving people an option to invest in really secure private retirement accounts makes a lot of sense. Federal employees have the Federal Thrift Fund. It's been working great. They can allocate a portion of their payroll into that. We should be able to do the same thing for everybody else.
All right. Well, that music means we're out of time. Bob Moffit of the Heritage Foundation, thank you for your time today, sir. We'll talk again soon. We'll be back with more right after this.
This is Uncommon Moments. Here's former Super Bowl winning NFL coach Tony Dungy and his wife Lauren sharing from their book Uncommon Marriage.
Taking on too much was not a new challenge for me and Lauren. We had to be aware when we had been running ourselves down. We had noticed that some of our disagreements, especially the major ones, occurred when we were tired.
Sometimes agreeing to disagree worked for us to help us both think about the problem. We put the disagreement aside for the moment until we could talk about it later, when both of us were less tired or emotional. Ephesians 4:26 says, "Don't sin by letting anger control you." The next time you have a disagreement with your spouse, make sure you're communicating with respect and love.
Tony and Lauren Dungy, authors of Uncommon Marriage, learning about lasting love and overcoming life's obstacles together. Discover more at CoachDungy.com.
Abraham Hamilton III.
God put us in this world at this time to be salt and light. We don't fool because of the darkness that we're facing. This is not the first time in the world's history that it's gotten dark. God has called you and I to be his ambassadors, even in this dark moment.
Tune in to the Hamilton Corner, weekdays at 5 p.m. Central on Urban Family Talk.
My name is Rodney. A month ago, I saw some guys I used to smoke crack with before I came to Teen Challenge. They couldn't believe that I was the same guy. In this program, I got the kind of change you can see.
If you know an adult or teenager who's struggling with a chemical addiction, Teen Challenge can help. Call us today at 417-581-2181 or reach us online at teenchallengeusa.com. This is Urban Family Talk.
Equipped with Chris Brooks.
This program is an apologetic endeavor. What I want to do is really train you in the art and science of defending and commending your Christian faith to people who maybe they've been hurt by the church, maybe they don't believe like you believe, and you're saying to yourself, how do I have an effective conversation with them? Well, we're looking for an evangelistic edge, if you will, that will allow us to more effectively, more contextualize the gospel so that we can reach men and women for Christ. Quite often, the on-ramp, if you will, is looking at culture and taking advantage of the conversations that folks are already having and saying, how can I leverage this to get people to talk about Jesus? This show becomes kind of massively significant to you if your desire is to reach people for Christ.
Get equipped with Chris Brooks.
Join me Monday through Friday at noon Central Time on Urban Family Talk.
This is Stacey on the Right on Urban Family Talk.
I think people understand that there might need to be redactions when you're dealing with sensitive topics, but what the FBI and Department of Justice have done over the course of the last year is redact things time and time again that were not national security issues, but were things that were embarrassing to the FBI or DOJ. I know this is a very bad period for the FBI, but the best disinfectant is sunlight, and we all need to know what we were dealing with so we can make sure that we don't have these kinds of mishandling of politicized probes ever again. So I hope they don't redact too much.
Yeah. Well, hoping isn't going to get it done. The redactions are going to continue because no one wants to be the owner of all of this really embarrassing information, including the FBI. And it's really disappointing because it's making the whole Bureau look bad when really it's a few people who were obsessed with a singular political outcome, and they've just tanked the whole party for everybody. Welcome back to the show, everybody. StaceyOnTheRight.com is a website, and you were just listening to Molly Hemingway talking about the FBI redactions and this IG report that's due out any minute, just literally any second. It's supposed to be coming out. And so we're going to be seeing the fallout from that. Woo. Okay. So now I want to listen to the president. So you've got a supporter of the president. I mean, Newt Gingrich can be pretty critical of President Trump, but he also is a supporter. And he was asked about his previous comments on getting rid of the White House press briefings. And this is interesting because really he makes a lot of sense here about the need for the briefings or the lack thereof. It's number 7.
You know, Speaker, there has been talk recently about whether we even need White House press briefings every day. That maybe some of them should be in an office and not all televised because it looks like some of the reporters might be doing a little grandstanding. I can't even imagine that.
Look, I advocated at the very beginning of this administration that they just get rid of the whole thing.
Really?
Yeah.
Not even do it off the record. Of course, I was dripping with sarcasm when I said I couldn't imagine it.
Here's what I mean when I say get rid of the whole thing. You have a relatively small number of reporters who are important because they're in the White House. And they're very precious, and they sit around and talk with each other all day. And deep down, they resent the fact that they're voyeurs. They're at the beck and call of the president.
Has this always existed, or just now?
It's existed for at least, I think, since Kennedy.
So, but isn't that important?
It was the rise of television. And my point was just, you know, there are 1,000 ways to communicate with the American people. You don't owe the American people having 50 or 60. I mean, you have 3 or 4 clowns who insist on getting in fights with her. And they're only important because they get in fights with her.
Wow. So he's talking about the people who make it their business to really, it's almost a persecution complex for Sarah Huckabee Sanders. And when she strikes back against them, they always say, oh, that's not true. Well, we don't have anything against you. We just want you to answer our questions. What they're saying is we want you to give us the answers we're looking for. You're horrible. He's horrible. Give us the answers that we deserve. Give us the answers that make sense to what the narrative that we're spinning. That's what we want. And if they get an idea in their minds that the president has done or said something, and they go to her with a question about it and she doesn't give them the answer they want, they just decide, well, we'll just keep asking her about this because she's lying. Now, there have been some notable instances where, you know, there's been something inaccurate that she's shared based on what she's been told. And they seem to want to hold her accountable for it as if to say, you know, he made a mistake, but you're going to be the one. We're going to get you. We're going to string you up and put you out there on blast. We're going to burn you at the stake because you work for him. And if you don't want us to do that to you, then quit. Put somebody else up there so we can do the same thing to them. They're like rabid beasts. And it's unacceptable to me. And one prime example of what has been going on with these media types is Brian Stelter, who, you know, if you really follow Brian Stelter closely, he seems like he's a decent guy. He's married. They have a baby. He's obviously on the left, but he'll often offer pretty thoughtful commentary on topics. So it's not as if you can't see the humanity there. But he recently took off after President Trump's wife, the First Lady of the United States, Melania, for not being visible. So she hadn't been visible at a public event for over 20 days. I believe it was 25 or 26 days. And so he put a little calendar up with red, they look like red ticket stubs on them. And, you know, it was all the days they hadn't seen her in a row. And he said, what does it mean? You know, it's a meaningful question. People are worried and interested. Well, she had some kind of benign kidney surgery, and that was announced, and that she was at Walter Reed, and she stayed there for 5 days, and then she came out of that, and she's at the White House. That's where they reported that she came from Walter Reed to the White House, and then she just didn't do any public events. Now, a lot of people have come on Twitter after he posted that image and said, dude, my cousin had that. My sister had that. I had that same embolism surgery, the surgery for the kidneys, and it actually knocked me out, and I was out for a few weeks, you know? So whether or not she was recuperating for all of the 26 days or not is kind of irrelevant. She had a surgery, and she wasn't in the public eye. And there is no requirement for her to be seen publicly anyway. There were many times where I hadn't seen or heard anything from Michelle Obama, and I never thought that Barack Obama was abusing her. And it never occurred to me to keep a running tab of how many days she was out of the public eye. I just assumed as a wife and a mom that if she was out of the public eye for 3 or 4 days or whatever it was, that was her business. I was really only concerned with what President Obama was doing. Aside from that disastrous, school lunch thing, it really wasn't like I just did not, it wasn't a concern. And so I was disappointed to see the tweet from Brian Stelter and the surrounding, like there were people who were tweeting the president, did you beat her? Did you kick her in the back? You know, come on. And yes, as I said at the top of the hour, if you're just tuning into the show, I started off the show with the fact that I'm equal opportunity in defending the first ladies of the United States, whether they're Democrats or Republicans, when their private lives and their personal appearance and their personal attributes are attacked. I just think it's wrong. So anyway, now we're going to pivot over to the Consumer Financial Protection Bureau. Say that 10 times fast. Remember, that's Elizabeth Pocahontas Warren's favorite accomplishment. She stood that agency up. And you've got Mick Mulvaney, who has really been having a good time pointing out how the Democrats' desire to set up an unaccountable bureaucracy to do their bidding has really bitten them since now the shoe's on the other foot and the Republicans are in charge. Now, I am one of the first people to say that as soon as that agency was created, I added that to a list of things that I felt like a Republican president should dismantle. Not reduce, not restaff, but dismantle. The same way that I expected and still do expect President Trump to dismantle Obamacare. Now, he hasn't done that. He has eliminated the individual mandate, but the rules and regulations and system of laws that enable Obamacare to still be a thing, those still exist. And those are the things that we want to see repealed, not replaced, but eliminated. So when we're talking about the CFPB, he could have just killed it last year, honestly. But he didn't. He put Mick Mulvaney on it. Mick Mulvaney is the acting director. And there's a 25-member advisory board. And yesterday, Mick Mulvaney let them all go. He was like, see ya. By the way, you guys can call in if you want. Feel free to call in 866-963-2037. So Mick Mulvaney has said that he's going to basically, through the CFPB, revamp the Consumer Advisory Board, known as the CAB, in the fall with all new members. Now, the panel traditionally played this influential role in advising CFPB leadership. They suggest new regulations, they suggest new policies, but some of the members who are prominent consumer advocates, academics, industry executives, began to complain very publicly that Mulvaney was ignoring them and making unwise decisions about the agency since he took over as acting director. So on Monday, 11 of the board members held a news conference and criticized Mulvaney for canceling the legally required meetings with the group. So, 2 days later on Wednesday, group members were notified that they were being replaced and that they could not reapply for the spots on the new board. The agency spokesman, whose name is John Swartaki, took a final swipe at the group. Here's his quote. The outspoken members of the Consumer Advisory Board seem more concerned about protecting their taxpayer-funded junkets to Washington, D.C. and being wined and dined by the Bureau than protecting consumers. So they're going to hold more town halls, more roundtable discussions, and the new Consumer Advisory Board will have fewer members. Now, Democrats are, obviously incensed. This is their agency, their baby. They liked having their same board members on there. Having all of the board members from before tossed off, after they've been making a stink is so totally unacceptable. So Senator Elizabeth Warren weighed in, Sherrod Brown weighed in, and that's fine. That's fine. But what I'd like to see is the elimination of the rogue independent agency called the Consumer Financial Protection Bureau. It's not accountable to voters. It has no oversight by Congress, and it should be eliminated. And I mean, no kidding. This is one of those no-brainers, something easy to do that would lower government and make government more efficient. And it goes along with what President Trump has already been doing, which is cutting federal payroll. So far, since he's become president, he has reduced federal payroll by 24,000 jobs. In May, 3,000 jobs were cut, and federal employment dropped by 24,000 since the beginning of the Trump presidency. And that is information that was released by the Bureau of Labor Statistics. Overall employment in the private sector is increasing, as was employment in state and local governments, but federal employment is on the decline. So in April, there were 2,789,000 people employed in civilian federal government jobs. And in December, the month before Trump took office, there were 2,810,000 civilians employed in the federal government. And that is now dropped by 24,000. So, they have some other numbers here, but suffice it to say, we want to see more of that. So am I saying I don't think that people should have jobs? No, I think we should have fewer federal government jobs. That's what I'm saying. We need fewer federal government jobs. The federal government should be lean, mean, efficient, and singularly focused on constitutionally mandated activities. The rest of it should be in the private sector. And the reason is because the private sector holds employees accountable, and when they don't perform, they have consequences. That is something that the federal government is just egregiously in the wrong on, and we need less of that. We need more accountability. So I want to give you guys a preview of the remainder of the week. Obviously, 5 o'clock, I'm going to be filling in on the Hamilton Corner. That's same bat channel, same bat station, 5 o'clock. And then we will also have tomorrow Julia Nista, who's a reporter for the Daily Caller. She's going to come on and talk current events. And Lauren Zelt, Republican strategist, she'll be with us on Monday. And then we will have Josh Hawley scheduled in for next week. And we have also Angela Morabito, senior campaign organizer for StandUnited.org. She'll be joining us next week as well. And I want to give you guys a heads up about the conference. We have the Urban Family Talk conference that's August 17th and 18th in Tupelo, and that is going to be a fantastic event. You're gonna want to register for that and join us. We have wonderful speakers: Ryan Baumberger, Will and Miki Addison, Hamilton Corners host Abraham Hamilton III, Lonnie Poindexter, Pastor Joseph Parker. So many great speakers are going to be there, and we're excited about it. And so $35 to register. I think the table registration is still at $50. So you can sell your books, whatever you have. So think about joining us there. We'd love to see you, love to meet you and shake your hand. And that's the show for today. God bless. Have a fantastic evening. Catch me on the Hamilton Corner in about an hour. And see you tomorrow.